This is 9 News with Peter Overton.
Good evening. We begin our bulletin tonight in Sydney, where the painstaking search for a woman who is still unaccounted for after a unit exploded is becoming more desperate by the minute. Let's go live now to our Sydney newsroom and Nine's Matt Cannellan. Matt, where do things stand this evening as we come to you?
Peter, good evening. This is the scene tonight in Wayland, in Sydney's western suburbs, where rescuers are working around the clock. Just in the past few moments, another huge slab of concrete was removed by workers. There are still fears a young trainee nurse was visiting her mother at the unit block when it exploded yesterday, and that she could still be trapped beneath the rubble. The search is now approaching its 34th hour. Rescue workers sifting through enormous piles of rubble, hoping to find any signs of life. It's a delicate process, so delicate the urban search and rescue team with experience in earthquake zones are at the heart of it. And you can see from the air exactly why that's the case. The townhouse blown to pieces by the force of this explosion. Earlier today we spoke to Carol, who was in the unit below when it happened.
I couldn't get out. There was no stairwell. It was gone. My neighbour's unit was gone. The firemen came and got you out.
Peter, these units are government owned, and tonight an urgent investigation is underway into the suggestion a possible build-up of gas could be to blame. OK, Matt, thank you. To a developing story, and Queensland Police are investigating tonight after 2 people were found dead at a home in Brisbane's north. Nine's Claire Todd-Hunter is there for us this evening. Claire, good evening to you. What do we know about the victims?
Well, police are still in the early stages of their investigations, Pete, working to identify the 2 victims, a man and a woman found dead at this home here in the suburb of Albany Creek. Earlier this evening, we understand they were suffering gunshot wounds. The home has been a crime scene since 5:30 p.m. with a heavy police presence on site. We've seen forensic teams going in and out of the home. An ambulance was on site earlier too, though it's unclear who they were treating. We have been speaking to neighbours about the family living at this home. They tell us there was an elderly woman and her adult son who had been here for quite a long time, maybe more than 20 years. They were fairly quiet, but we did hear that police and ambulances had been called to this address earlier this week on at least one other occasion. Another neighbour, though, telling us it's generally a very quiet suburban street.
I've lived here half my life, so it's pretty surprising, honestly. Yeah, it's pretty devastating to hear about it.
Now, police have nobody in custody over this shooting. We don't believe they're looking for any suspects. They say, Pete, that there is no threat to the wider community.
All right, Claire, thank you. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters have shut down Melbourne's busiest intersection, dumping rubble and staging a sit-down protest. Nine's Dougal Beattie joins me live from outside Flinders Street Station. Dougal, hello to you. It caught police by surprise.
Well, the demonstrations have been going on for 34 weeks, but this was something different. Police were escorting thousands of pro-Palestine protesters through the city. But when they approached Flinders Street, that is when a truck has dumped a load of concrete and rubble in the middle of that intersection. It brought traffic to a standstill. That's where they held a mock missile strike. There were hundreds of them waving flags and lighting flares there. They were carried with them some fake missiles and drones, and then the protesters laid down in the middle of the street to really stage it as a Gaza bomb site. Now, police have condemned this action. They say the protesters only wanted to cause maximum disruption, and a police car was also damaged during the protest when some anti-Israel stickers were put onto it. A couple of the demonstrators also climbed up onto the station behind me to hang a sign up there. Now, that intersection was impacted for hours as crews worked to get that rubble out of the way. Police have since caught up with the truck driver and say that he will be charged on summons. Peter?
Dougal, thank you. Australia is preparing to surrender billions of dollars in gas revenue to stop Beijing's attempts to woo one of our nearest neighbours. 9 News can tonight reveal that the federal government has offered the Timor-Leste government incentives to fast-track a long-stalled offshore gas project. Here's our National Affairs editor, Andrew Probyn.
China has been getting cosy with Timor-Leste, and it's beginning to concern Australia. So Canberra's upping the ante through Foreign Minister Penny Wong's special envoy, former Victorian Premier Steve Bracks.
There is a significant offer there. It'll be of great benefit to Timor-Leste.
9 News can reveal Timor-Leste has been offered a multi-billion-dollar lifeline to fast-track the long-stalled Greater Sunrise offshore gas project.
To see the field developed as soon as feasibly possible.
And for the revenue to flow to the Timor-Leste government.
The Greater Sunrise gas field, 450 kilometres northwest of Darwin and 150 kilometres south of Timor-Leste, holds $50 billion worth of gas. If Timor-Leste agrees to have the gas piped to Darwin for processing, it'll not only receive 80% of the revenue, but Australia has also offered half its share to set up a dedicated infrastructure fund for Timor.
We don't want a pipeline for the sake of a pipeline. The pipeline coming to Timor-Leste will generate thousands of jobs.
The Timorese want to spur economic development by processing the gas in the south of their nation, but this may be commercially unviable compared to the Darwin option, both sides agreeing to an independent analysis.
If it is persuasive enough, I'm sure the government would consider it.
A promising sign, given the bad blood caused 20 years ago when Australia spied on the Timorese during negotiations over oil and gas fields. Australia's also offering Timor-Leste more migrant worker access, plus an equity stake in the Darwin processing plant to put the impoverished nation on a stable financial footing.
We don't want to push them to even think of going to China.
Getting gas flowing from Greater Sunrise has become a top strategic objective for the Albanese government to give Timor-Leste the ability to resist Beijing's influence. Andrew Probyn, 9 News.
The Defence Minister has used a meeting with his Chinese counterpart in Singapore to call out what he's called Beijing's unsafe and unprofessional behaviour on the high seas. Richard Marles registered Australia's concerns with Dongjun following an incident last month where a Chinese fighter jet dropped flares in front of an Australian helicopter off the Korean coast. Mr Marles said it was a very frank discussion.
Having a dialogue of that kind in place allows us to have a much better understanding of what we're doing and creates much greater safety.
Beijing blamed Australia for provoking the flare incident, claiming the helicopter was spying on Chinese military, an assertion rejected by Australia. Health authorities across the country are tonight warning of a surge in cases of the respiratory virus RSV. Let's bring in Adelaide reporter Gus McDonald as South Australia records a large spike. Gus, what can you tell us?
Pete, South Australia has currently recorded 1,970 cases of RSV. Now, that's a 15% jump on the same time last year. Health authorities have told us that the virus follows a seasonal pattern and that cases do rise during the cooler months. But this will only fuel calls for vaccines to be added to the National Immunisation Program, which is set to be discussed in Canberra on Tuesday at Federal Parliament. Health authorities have also warned that RSV is the leading cause of respiratory hospitalisations for children and that new parents especially need to be vigilant.
80 to 90% of children will get infected by their second birthday, and the first infection, which generally happens in the first 6 months of life, is quite severe enough for them to come to hospital.
SA Health confirmed to 9 News today that RSV antibody medications are available to infants who are at a high risk, but that those prevention products are currently limited. Pete.
Gus, thank you. You're watching Nine's Late News, seen right across Australia. Still to come tonight, the death of Queensland woman Natasha Ryan, who made headlines around the world after hiding in a cupboard for 5 years. Severe storms leave a trail of destruction in Western Australia as a pub's roof is ripped off. Plus Donald Trump at a UFC event days after becoming a convicted criminal. Natasha Ryan, the Queensland woman who hid in her boyfriend's cupboard for 5 years, has died. Ryan was 15 when she disappeared in central Queensland and was found to be alive during the trial of a man accused of her murder. It was later found she willingly ran away from home to be with her older boyfriend. The 40-year-old's body was found on a Rockhampton golf course this morning. Police say it isn't suspicious. And if you or someone you know is struggling to cope, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. South Africa is on a new political path for the first time in 30 years. The African National Congress Party has lost its parliamentary majority. With 99% of votes tallied, it secured just 40.2%. Nelson Mandela led the ANC to victory in South Africa's first democratic election in 1994. India's Prime Minister has been in power for a decade, and it looks like he'll be staying there. Narendra Modi is tipped to win a third consecutive term, according to the latest exit polls. Official results will be released in 2 days. Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated Israel will not end its war in Gaza unless Hamas is destroyed. The Prime Minister's statement cast doubt on the United States' recent announcement of a new Israeli-led ceasefire plan. Pro-Palestinian protesters then confronting President Joe Biden outside a church.
Mr. President, are we closer to a ceasefire?
Over the past 48 hours, Qatar, Egypt and the United States have all publicly called for a ceasefire. Homes in Western Australia have been torn apart and the roof ripped off a popular pub with people still inside as a severe storm tore through Perth and the state's southwest. Bunbury, the worst hit, 4 people injured and taken to hospital.
The Parade Hotel, no match for a monster storm.
It was scary. It was an intense blast, and I thought from where we were that the windows were caving.
The roof torn from the Bunbury pub with patrons inside. 2 were taken to hospital.
It's a sad story in the sense that those owners have put their heart and soul into rebuilding that pub after major fire damage.
Wild weather wreaking havoc. Southwest once again copping the worst of it.
Holy the neighbour's fence!
Always Garden flattened. The damage bill at least $500,000.
It's come through and cleared out everything.
Bunbury Surf Life-Saving Tower, another casualty to the severe weather. Wild winds ripping it from the sand, sending it flying several metres from the beach. Today, SES crews started assessing the damage while homeowners cleaned up the mess.
Well, it's a big storm, so it's the second one in less than a month, so Bunbury's copping a bit of a hammering.
The Bureau of Meteorology now working to determine whether or not Bunbury's storm was in fact a tornado.
The final report that we're waiting for is evidence of rotation.
The damage felt in Perth too. In Armidale, a huge tree toppled over, a driver smashing into it.
Very shaken, obviously, as you would be, really, really scary.
And there's more to come with another front expected Thursday. Rachel Clifford, 9 News.
Only days after becoming the first former US president to become a convicted criminal, Donald Trump has stolen the show at a UFC event in New Jersey. His popularity there seemingly undiminished.
Boy, the round of applause he's getting right now is pretty staggering. Well done, right?
The woman at the centre of the hush money trial, Stormy Daniels, today saying she believes Mr Trump should be sentenced to jail and that he's completely and utterly out of touch with reality. At the age of 93, Rupert Murdoch seems confident he's found the one, marrying for a 5th time. The Australian media mogul has wed in his private vineyard in the United States.
Introducing for the first time the 5th Mrs Murdoch. After a whirlwind romance, the 93-year-old media mogul has married Elena Zukova at his Los Angeles estate. His bride is a retired molecular biologist and 25 years his junior. Rupert's ex-wife Wendy played matchmaker, introducing the pair last year, not long after his previous engagement to Anne Leslie Smith was called off. No stranger to matrimony, Rupert Murdoch wed his first wife in 1956. 11 years on, he made it official with journalist Anna Torv. In 1999, he said "I do" to Wendy Deng. He followed in the footsteps of Mick Jagger in 2016, when model Jerry Hall was the one to walk down the aisle. These personal pursuits often became tabloid fodder, Murdoch a common target of an industry he helped create. There were rumours of wedding bells earlier today when a Daily Mail paparazzi spotted this flower delivery, but the official confirmation came from one of his own News Corp mastheads. A hopeless romantic, perhaps, but a businessman through and through. Amber Caneen, 9 News.
3 teenagers have been rescued after their vehicle became bogged on the mid-west coast of Western Australia. A pilot calling it in after flying over a help message written in the sand. The group was stranded for 6 hours before rescue and then reunited with family and friends. Everyone's favourite blue heeler has teamed up with Robert Irwin to launch Queensland's biggest tourism campaign in more than a decade, urging travellers to head to the Sunshine State. It comes as hundreds of Bluey fans gathered today, hoping to pull off the world's largest game of keepy uppy and keep a red balloon off the ground.
Showcasing to the world what a wonderful state Bluey and her family live in.
The campaign aims to attract an extra 1.3 million people to Queensland. You're watching Nine's Late News broadcast across the country. When we come back, finance with Scott Phillips, inflation, the Reserve Bank and what's ahead when our markets open tomorrow. Welcome back. Let's go to finance and our regular look at the week ahead with the Chief Investment Officer of the Motley Fool, Scott Phillips. Scott, I haven't spoken to you for a while. Good evening.
Peter, good evening. Lovely to talk to you, mate, as always.
Good to see you too. Look, inflation is heading in the wrong direction. Are you concerned about the most recent figure?
Mate, I'm an optimist, as you know, but the answer is yes, unfortunately. Not just the most recent figure, which was an increase. So April was up on March, but March was up on February as well. So when you start to get 2 in a row, you start to worry about whether or not enough has been done. Now, I don't want to raise the spectre of more rate rises, but the simple reality is inflation is not going down. And the RBA, by its own admission, is saying the inflation rate is outside its range that it expected as it kept coming down, even allowing for the fact they didn't expect it to be back within that target band until the end of next year. So yes, unfortunately concerned is probably the right word.
Yes, we don't want that trend. Inflation, part of the story is businesses and profits. We'll get a look at how that's going on Tuesday.
Yeah, we get the business gross profit numbers out, mate, and this has been a really hot topic recently. Of course, the question about whether businesses are price gouging, whether it's just international inflation, whether there's domestic inflation, is it wages, is it business profits, what's going on? We'll get the business gross profit numbers out. Now, it's always a very volatile series, and people will jump on it from both ends, by the way, to try and make their own cases, as they always do. But it is a really important one. Firstly, we don't want to see a lot of price gouging, but secondly, if profits do fall meaningfully, it also talks to the willingness and perhaps concerns about unemployment moving forward.
We know it's a juggling act for the Reserve Bank. You've touched on that. How do you think we're going, or they're going, to get this economy moving as they deal with inflation and doing the balance?
It's really tough, mate, because you're absolutely right. The balance is exactly that. They want to keep the economy moving forward. They want to keep us going forward, and that gross profit number is kind of part of that. On the other hand, if it grows too quickly, we do run the risk of inflation. We've talked before about the fact that I think the RBA are going to say, well, we'd like to avoid a recession, but we really, really want to get rid of inflation. If it comes down to a choice, I think they'll probably choose to risk a recession to try and knock inflation on the head once and for all. They've talked about this soft landing. If they can get it, that's a wonderful thing. If they can't, then we do run the risk, unfortunately, of some economic decline.
Let's hope we get the soft landing. Before we go, what can we expect tomorrow when the market opens?
We get to finish with some good news, Peter. We had a very good night on Wall Street on Friday night, our time. The Australian future is likely to gain about 0.9% when the market opens tomorrow.
Always terrific having you on the Late News, Scott. Thanks so much.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Peter.
Stay with us. Your weather details are next on the Late News. Taking a look at the national weather forecast, sunshine in Brisbane tomorrow, a top of 21, mostly sunny for Sydney and 19. A cloudy start to the week in Canberra, a top of 13, a chilly low of 1 degree. Cloudy in Melbourne, 14 the top there. Rainy in Hobart, the same top temp. Becoming cloudy in Adelaide, 16 degrees. A couple of showers for Perth, 21. Darwin sunny with a top of 32 degrees. And looking ahead to Tuesday, Brisbane mostly sunny, 21. A little cloud about for Sydney, 19 degrees. Canberra morning frost, then a partly cloudy day. Melbourne cloudy and 14. Hobart a shower or two, 16 degrees. Adelaide partly cloudy and 17. Perth 22 degrees, sunny in Darwin and 31. That wraps up Nine's Late News for this Sunday. Our next news is at 5 a.m, followed by the Today Show. I'm Peter Overton. Thanks so much for joining us. On behalf of the team, good night.